Okay, so I made this cushion cover the other day, and you guys seem to quite like the feathers. I don't know if you can see them very well there, but I thought I'd show you how I draw my feathers, so how I practice feathers. So I've just got some A4 paper that I'm going to use, and I usually just sit in front of the TV at night and practice drawing feathers. So this is how I do it. I usually start, and you can draw yourself a square and practice filling in the square, but I find the more I practice, the more I can work with the changes of direction. So I find that by just practicing on a blank piece of paper, filling up the paper, it tends to work best for me. So I'll just draw, first of all I'll draw like a little stem and maybe put a little curve on the top, and then I go into like a teardrop kind of shape at the top there. So I've already got one feather at the top. When I draw feathers, I actually started working from the top and drawing feathers and filling them back in down the stem, but I found I was actually more comfortable drawing them from the bottom. So that's kind of how I quilt them now too. And what I do is I kind of start with like a curve, and then I bring the pen back around, or the pencil back around, and that's kind of my first feather shape. So I draw underneath and back and over like that, and I find I'm more comfortable doing it that way than the traditional working from the top back down to the bottom. And then what I do is I'll come back up from the bottom and draw another feather around that first one. The biggest thing to remember is to try and bring that curve back down into the stem as if you're drawing back over the top of the stem. If you bring the feather too straight into the stem, you'll end up with a really wonky looking feather. So you really want to bring it back down into the stem as much as possible. So bring it back down into the stem, and by doing that you get a really nice shape feather. So I'll just continue on like that. Sometimes I'll put in a little one because I like to curve around it and add a bigger one over the top of the smaller one, and that can look really cute to vary the shape of your feather all along. So I'll just keep going, and if I need to I'll move the paper so that I'm in the right angle, because when you're quilting them you can kind of move your quilt around and get the best angle for you. So I'll just sit and draw the feathers like this. If they overlap, I'm not going to rub that out and go back. I'm kind of trying to work around a camera here, so it's a bit tricky, but I'll just keep going and filling them up, tracing, backtracking over that part of the feather. You can do feathers without the backtracking. You can kind of travel up the stem and go back and over, and then you need to trace back there and come around again. But I find I'm more comfortable, and I like the look better when I do travel along the one that was there before. So I'll keep going around, moving the paper as I need to. And I really like using a mechanical pencil for this. I find that if you use a regular pencil that you have to sharpen, the tip does tend to get blunt, and it smudges, and you don't have that nice clean line. So when I'm drawing feathers I like to use a mechanical pencil so it stays nice and sharp. When I get to the tip I've got this big gap here, and feathers are really like handwriting. You'll end up developing your own look and style. When I get to the tip like that, I like to draw a kind of a big feather like that to fill in at the top, and then I'll travel back down the spine. I like to overlap the spine quite a lot, especially when I'm quilting, because I find it builds up those layers of threads, and it actually looks really nice to have that strong stem. So I'll just keep going like this. Again, put in a little one here and there, and just work all the way up my stem. It's good to add in curves in different directions and do some quite sharp curves like this, because the more you practice in the different shapes the better you'll become at negotiating those tricky areas on your quilt. So I'll just keep going all the way up. when I get to the curve, I'll start doing a few smaller ones and curve them around. But you still want to come back into the spine at that really sharp angle. And there we go, finished. So that finishes it off. Now I've found when I'm drawing them, I actually quite like to echo. I find that it makes the drawing look better. When you're quilting, of course, you're not going to be seeing the drawn lines. You're going to see the puffiness in between the drawn lines. So I find that the drawing doesn't look near as good as the quilting. So if you're even halfway happy with your sketch, then you're going to be really happy with your quilting. So I just keep going all the way around and echo like I would on the sewing machine. I find that echoing really helps to make a design stand out. So if you want to draw attention to your quilting, then echo it. If you don't want to draw attention to it, then leave the echoing out and it'll kind of blend into your background filler. I really like filling with pebbles. I've found that that's something that I can really quilt quite easily. So I like to fill with pebbles, but you can fill with things like just straight lines or grids. Just drawing a grid can be a really nice filler. But with pebbles, when you're drawing pebbles, I like to think of them as a figure eight. I find that by doing a figure eight, I get better looking pebbles. So I'll do a pebble, one circle, and then I'll go and do like the figure eight shape. And then again, so each time I'm drawing a new circle, I'm changing direction. And I find that's what helps me get really nice pebbles. If I need to, I'll continue around to get down to fill into these little shapes. But by practicing these pebbles and feathers and fillers, you'll be much more comfortable when you get to the sewing machine. So it's good to have a practice sandwich next to your machine that you can just go and practice anytime you feel like it or anytime you've got 5 minutes. And once you've filled up a few A4 pieces of paper, you'll find that that hugely improves your quilting just because you know where you're going next. So there we go, that's how I would do a freeform feather. Another thing that looks really cool when you're doing a hand-drawn feather rather than a quilted feather is to fill in with little, I don't know, just little lines. It can look really cool on your hand-drawn piece. Sometimes it's not necessary on a quilt because you get that really beautiful puffiness from feathers that you kind of don't want to fill. But if the whole feature of the piece that you're making is the quilting, then these little lines inside the feather can really make it look cool. I like to throw in like a swirl every so often just to break it up, make it more interesting. So there you go, that's how I draw my feathers. If you have a go, I'd love to see some pictures, so send it through to the Facebook page, and if you want any help with your feathers or your drawing, send me some pictures and I'm happy to help anytime I can.